Henry Ford once said that if there's any secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from their angle as well as from your own. What Henry Ford was talking about is practicing cognitive empathy, also known as perspective taking. My guest and founder of Others Unlimited, Karen Faith, teaches people in organizations how to be more successful by learning and practicing cognitive empathy to achieve better results in communication, trust, culture, collaboration, among many other benefits. In this conversation, Karen and I talk about different types of empathy, her empathy training curriculum, the benefits of practicing cognitive empathy, the importance of personal boundaries, developing what she calls unconditional welcome, self-awareness, practicing ethnography, and the arc of Karen's professional journey from musician to performance artist to the present day, and the influence of her training in the arts on her work with organizations. Karen also shares her reflections on making business into an art form and how she has transformed deep personal pain into gifts that she uses to help people change and grow. Let's dive in. Welcome to Making Business Art. So thank you so much for making time to be on here today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm good. How about you?
I'm great. And I'm very excited I was very excited when I came across your profile. I looked into your back. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about your company, all these trainings that you do. But I think a big part of your work involves listening or like deep listening. And I'll start with this question, what is something you love listening to?
I mean, well, my first answer is music. And that's how I got involved in this too. My family is full of musicians and I was raised listening to music. And when I went to music school, that's kind of what started my journey as an artist. And later on, much later in life, when I was working in an advertising agency where I was giving workshops to internal workshops for employees, and I wanted to do a listening workshop, I actually borrowed the techniques that I learned in music school of ear training and how to kind of dial in specifically. And that was what my original listening curriculum was based on, was listening to music. But that's music listening is a really special practice. And that's been very important to the work that I do.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've been listening to lately that you really enjoy?
I have a very old favorite that I listen to new recordings of, which is a Bach chaconne in G minor D minor. That is, I recently came across a harpsichord recording of it, and I usually listen to it played on the violin. And so it's kind of funny that it's new to me, but still one of the oldest things that I listen to. I've probably heard it more than any other piece of music.
Nice. Well, that's lovely. So let's jump into the one question I'd like to start with is, tell us about where do you work and what do you get paid to do?
Well, where I work is kind of wherever I am called, but the company that I work for is my company called Others Unlimited. And Others Unlimited is an empathy training company that's based in ethnographic research practice. And I founded that company 3 years ago, a little more than 3 years ago, coming out of the pandemic, still in the pandemic, as an extension of the work that I was doing inside of advertising. I was working in advertising for about 10 years as an ethnographer. I was a people researcher. And in researching people, which obviously requires a lot of listening and observation skills, sort of discovered that those skills are kind of the building blocks of relationships. And so teaching folks how to connect with each other using research skills, research tools, has been really special because it's not emotional. It's not necessarily very warm and fuzzy. A lot of people think of it that way. It's actually it's a practice of neutrality and objectivity, even though those things are, well, impossible, but kind of work toward them in order to connect with other people, which is a little bit counterintuitive. A lot of folks think of empathy as a sort of embrace of warmth and connection, and from that point of view, but it's really different. Cognitive empathy, as I practice it, is more about perspective taking and finding difference and then kind of enjoying that discovery. But my company is Others Unlimited, and you asked what I get paid to do is to assist teams in building the skills of connection. And sometimes those connections are internal, helping with communication and collaboration inside the team. And sometimes they're external in connecting with audiences, connecting with clients, connecting with customers. They're the same skill set, but they're applied a little bit differently depending on where the connection is. But yeah, it's all about curiosity and non-judgment.
Yeah. Well, I also have a background in anthropology and I do design research. So like I'm totally bought in. But those customers, clients that you've encountered in the past that maybe they're not very sure, like, what is this empathy thing? What are some of the benefits that you might describe to that customer that's on this? What are the benefits to their organization?
It is a lot easier to point out the risks of not doing the work
Mm-hmm.
because the benefits are actually limitless.
Mm-hmm.
It benefits absolutely everything. It benefits company culture, and it benefits trust. It benefits marketing and sales and negotiations and all these kinds of everything, absolutely everything. But I don't usually do a lot of evangelism because I find that my clients already know that's important, and that's why they've come to me.
Mm-hmm.
If a client doesn't believe that's important, convincing them of that is not the kind of work that I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't get involved in that too much, but when I do, sometimes there are people who have to be sort of brought on board who may not really understand what we're doing or why we're doing it. And that's usually comes down to honestly attrition costs. When
Mm-hmm.
you're losing talent because the culture doesn't feel welcoming, doesn't feel belonging, isn't harmonious, when there's no real true collaboration or community in the culture, then folks leave. And when folks leave, it's super expensive. So I would say it's just really expensive not to practice empathy and perspective taking.
Yeah. No, I agree. I also see it. I see on your website though that you frame your empathy training, your tagline is kind of like about research, collaboration, and citizenship.
Mhm.
And that last word really caught my attention. So tell me more about your choice to call out citizenship as part of your offering.
Yeah, that word has a really different first meaning, I think, for particularly immigrants, but it's I don't mean it with regard to immigration. I mean it with regard to being a citizen of a
Mm-hmm.
community. That citizenship to me means joining, being a part of it, not standing on the outside, not being isolated, and really signing up to be a part of a community, whether that's a team or a culture or the community of the audience that you're speaking to. But citizenship is the practice of, in my estimation,
Mm-hmm.
of taking responsibility in a co-created way. It's a shared responsibility between the individual and the group to not just create a sense of belonging, but also to invest in building those connections and maintaining those connections when problems happen, because problems always happen. All problems are people problems, and all people are human, and all humans make mistakes. And I don't just mean little ones. I mean really big ones, huge mistakes. I know from my own life that I can have the best intentions and do things that seem unforgivable. And so I
Mm-hmm.
have to give that grace to other people. And I think for me, when I think about citizenship, I think, who are the people in my life who are invested in long term empathy, which means that long term non judgment, curiosity, grace, and mercy that it takes to walk alongside someone as a human being with a human being.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we are just living in a moment where a lot more citizenship is needed, or we would benefit from that. And there's so much like in grouping, out grouping of people. You mentioned immigrants a moment ago. For instance, that's a canvas for some people to drive division among people, etc. And not only that, but also businesses sometimes, I think, frame their existence in citizenship or that type of participation that you're describing. It's not necessarily in society. Let's talk about. So just tell me about the basic principles that you teach people about empathy.
So it is important first to define what I mean when I say empathy,
Mm-hmm.
because empathy is a very broadly used word that often refers to things that I am not talking about. So, and there are three really distinct types of empathy, and they are affective empathy, somatic empathy, and cognitive empathy. So affective empathy is that like caring, emotional, kind of very similar to compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's really caring about your experience, my impact on you, what you're going through right now, what you're living in your life, and having that matter to me in an emotional way, in a tender way. Somatic empathy is a physical embodiment of another person's experience, which is kind of spooky and weird, but it is real. It's a little rarer,
Mhm.
but it can happen at times that specifically like sympathy pains that happen between spouses in labor, right? That's an example of it. But also a kid gave me the example the other day of like, you know how when you throw up, if you see someone else throw up, and I'm like, yeah, that is an example of somatic empathy. Or
Yeah.
maybe even when you yawn, when you see
Mhm.
someone yawn, it's a kind of somatic empathy, kind of hard to teach. It doesn't have a lot of practical use. There are some very direct practical uses, particularly in product design
Mhm.
and just experience design, really understanding what another person is physically going
Yeah.
through. But it's not, I don't mess with it. And those people who are, let's say, naturally gifted in that area, they often need to learn how to not do it, how to make boundaries,
Yeah.
how to separate their experiences from other people, because it can be really debilitating. So, anyway, that's not what I'm dealing with.
Mhm.
Cognitive empathy is what I'm dealing with. And cognitive empathy is the not necessarily emotional at all practice of stepping outside of my perspective, taking a look at things from yours. It requires a little bit of research, it requires a little bit of effort, but it does not require warmth or feeling at all. It does not require that I like you, that I agree with you, that I care for you, that I want you to care for me. I can practice cognitive empathy as a negotiator with the sole purpose of getting my way, getting you to agree to what I want you to agree with. And I might be pretty self-serving in that practice. So it is not, I try to divorce it as much as possible from the ideas that we have about it being a kind of moral practice of compassion. Affective empathy is closer to that, but I would even say that it's distinct from that as well.
Mhm.
But it's closer to that. But I like to keep things as scientific and maybe even stoic as possible so that number one, this practice can be more accessible to more people, particularly neurodivergent people or folks
Mhm.
who just don't feel like warm and fuzzy kind of folks. And also, it's just more applicable. It's easier and more accessible. And it also applies to so many more parts of our lives when we can think about it from a non emotional point of view. The other thing is that when we think about empathy in the same kind of box as sympathy or compassion, we're usually talking about someone who's suffering.
Mhm.
Cognitive empathy can and should be practiced with folks who are not necessarily suffering. We want to know what makes people feel strong, what makes people feel joyful, what makes them be confident. Like we want to know those things too. We don't only practice empathy when someone's in pain. So cognitive empathy has a much broader, much more versatile application, and it gives us a lot more insight. And that's what I practice. The tools of empathy,
Mhm.
which involve quite a lot of different things, but it kind of boils down to non-judgmental curiosity. The
Mhm.
curiosity is a very teachable skill set of question asking and adapting communication style. Non-judgment is the hard part to teach. Non-judgment is the part where I have to become extremely self-aware
Mhm.
of the biases that I'm carrying, the beliefs that I'm carrying, the ways that I have to resist the immediate opinions and responses and reactions that I may be having to you in order to actually really receive you as you are and not as I wish you to be.
Yeah.
That's the hard
Well,
work.
so aside the distinctions that you just made, are there any other misconceptions about empathy that come up when you're working with groups with different audiences?
Yeah, people think they often use the phrase, I have a lot of empathy, or he doesn't have a lot of empathy. And I don't think of it as something that you really have in that way. Like you kind of have it or you don't. Some people think like I'm just not that way, and some people just are that way. It is a buildable skill. So I think there's a misconception that some people just naturally are or naturally aren't. And also maybe this is going to get me in trouble, but when folks identify as an empath,
Mhm.
as an identity, I think this is problematic. It's problematic for a lot of reasons, but I don't think that there are some people who are empaths and some people who are not. And so whenever someone uses that language with me, I always try to kind of shift them out of that mindset, because it is not really, it's not an identity. It's not a type of person. It's a thing that we all have some capacity to do and
Mhm.
need to practice doing more.
Yeah. But wouldn't you say that perhaps some people's nervous system are just attuned, like more attuned to be more sensitive in some ways than others? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm one of those people.
Mm.
I have extremely sensitive senses.
Mm.
And I think that in a way that can be at times debilitating.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of people who have that kind of sensitivity. I think that it is not always useful to assign meaning to that sensitivity. For example, if when I am around you, I have a lot of anxiety, that doesn't mean I'm feeling your anxiety.
Mhm.
And so if I identify as an empath, I may mistranslate, misinterpret my sensation as thinking, oh, it's that person's feeling that I'm feeling.
Mm.
No, your feelings are your feelings, but you may be responsive to them. So the feeling might be similar, it might not be similar. But I think not, when we practice non-judgmental
Mhm.
curiosity, it's important to not just say, oh, I think I understand because I think I feel the same thing, but help me understand by showing me, ask more questions until you can find out, how is it different than what I'm feeling? I think I know what you're feeling. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more until maybe I
Mhm.
think, aha, now I really know how yours is different from mine.
Yeah. I agree with that. But I've also been in the room with people that can just have a sensitivity to read energy, to be like, oh, there's something going on in this corner of the room with this
Yeah,
person. Let me go check on that. And then might just
absolutely.
be something that it's I haven't even registered. And I'm a fairly sensitive person, so I kind of like admire that ability for some people to pick up. And anyway, there's some other. I just find the human nervous system and how it's attuned in different ways, like really just super interesting. Riffing off that, then what are like some really common questions that come up with during your trainings, like just pattern recognition question here, like what comes up a lot?
Most common thing that happens is that most people are very excited about the empathy training because they hope someone else, one of their teammates, will start being more empathetic toward them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really funny to me how common that is, because it's just so easy to assume that if I'm having a problem with you, it's because you are not understanding me. And I often tell folks, I'm like, if imagine if that person were in this room thinking the same thing about you, then which one of you is going to learn to do this? you know?
Yeah.
And you are actually the only person that you can change. You are the only person who can learn, who can grow, who can gain this skill. So instead of waiting for someone else to do it, you try doing it. And
Mhm.
it's great. That it really helps. But that's a very common thing that happens. But yeah, folks ask me a lot about how to deal with someone else who does not have any empathy. They say, how do I deal with this person who doesn't have any empathy? And yeah, and it's funny because the answer is always, do you? Are you practicing empathy? I find it really rare to encounter someone that really baffles me.
Mm.
Like when I practice empathy, when I really try to understand someone,
Mhm.
I usually get to a place where I'm like, you know what? That choice they made was kind of crazy and maybe even harmful, but I get it. I get why
Mhm.
they made that choice. I get where it came from. I don't agree with it. Wish they wouldn't have done it. I wish they would stop doing it, but I know why it's happening.
Yeah.
And so I am less upset and I am able to communicate better about what's happening, no matter what it is.
Yeah. I mean, been coming to appreciate over, well, many years now is how when we're different, it kind of
Mhm.
invites other people to be different
Yeah.
as well. And yeah, I also have been talking about with friends and colleagues lately about just reflections on like our participation in the things that we don't like. Not necessarily a popular conversation, by the way. But it's like, well, okay, so I mean, like what you're describing, we're having an experience we don't like, so situation, and then kind of taking stocks, like what's how am I participating in this? Doesn't mean that it's our fault, but we have a role in it, and can we distinguish what the role is, and then maybe try something different out and see what happens if something shifts. At least personally, sometimes that means that you really we really have to look at ourselves and see some things we might not like very much.
Yeah.
But it opens the door to good things, I think, most of the time.
And it's so important to build some skill in that area too, because we
Mm,
do have to look at things about
yeah,
ourselves which are not pretty.
yeah.
And if we come at that with shame, we're not going to get any further either. We have to give ourselves that same non judgmental curiosity, which is something that I call unconditional welcome,
Hmm.
where it's, can I observe myself with complete honesty? And the answer is no, not unless you can do so with love. It's terrifying to do that, especially if you're coming from a place of conditional welcome or of judgment or of shame. There's a it's a literal block to your ability to see. If you're refusing some things because they
Hmm.
don't fit into what you want, or if you're resisting or rejecting some things, you're not seeing the whole picture. So it's like, I can only be honest with myself
Hmm.
when I'm also being really kind. And it requires both. It's not giving myself a pass for everything. It's not saying that everything I do is okay. It's being the most fair evaluator. It's that, yes, I am okay exactly the way that I am, and there are things about myself which are problematic or which hurt other people or which aren't helping me, and I can change those things.
Yeah. Yeah. There came a point some years ago, just kind of developing this ability, just thinking some situation, oh, this person's just being an a-hole or something, this, that, and the other. And then kind of the practice of switching the question around. It's like, wait, am I being an a-hole? And then I'm like, oh crap, I am. And then just having to work through that. And like you're saying, just have compassion for yourself and just try to be like a better person, I guess. And then also just open an invitation to the other person to also participate in a different way with you, by us being different.
It's such an easy tool, though, to point out the projection, because I find
Mm.
that whatever it is that I'm complaining about
Hmm.
someone else, I am probably literally doing as well. And I had this recently when I accepted an invitation that I didn't want to accept,
Mm.
and I didn't want to go at all. And I told my friend that I didn't want to go, but she kind of pushed me. And so I went. And then chaos ensued. And I ended up being really angry with her afterwards, saying, I told her that I didn't want to go to that. And then I heard myself and, like, yeah, you told you too. Like, you're the one that broke your promise. I knew that I didn't want to, and I didn't listen to myself, but I'm mad at her for not listening to me. So I thought, okay, I'm literally doing the thing I'm accusing her of having done.
Well, our
And that's true
parents, it's
a lot.
usually that's another one where there's something one of your parents is doing that drives you crazy, and then after a while you're like, oh wait, I'm
Yeah.
really like this person because I come
Yeah.
from
The
this
genetics.
person.
Yeah. You're made out of their genetics.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I know, like recently with my life partner, there's a little bit of tension between her mom and her brother, and then the brother has some thoughts, some complaints about the mom acting in ABC way, and then we're both like, but they're exactly the same. But they're not seeing that. I think it's just helpful to recognize it, but then to also do the exercise of then reflecting it back to us and like, wait, do I do that? And
Yeah.
of course we do. So, yes. But so like as what's something that is audiences really regarding the practice, the material, and what ways have you devised to maybe help them overcome?
Sure. Yeah, I think that people communicate really differently and they have really different ways of processing information. And so some folks are really good at listening um, orally, just really taking that in. Some folks need to take notes in order to even get it into their brain.
Mm.
And also there are different types of listening too. I teach listening for feelings, facts, and context separately. They're different kind of things to
Mm.
tune into.
Mm.
And as a researcher, when I would conduct interviews and observations, I would record those things separately. What is the emotional experience that I'm witnessing? What are the facts of the situation? What are the context of the situation? And those are like different frequencies to tune into. A lot of people have been taught to listen from this sort of traditional active listening point of view, which is less about listening actually and more about communicating that you're listening, nodding your head and reflecting back and all this stuff.
Mm.
And it's not terrible, but I don't think it really goes far enough to really make sure that the information gets into my brain and actually can live there and generate some insight from it. So, for example, in my listening workshop, I try to get at that in a couple of different ways, where we actually practice reading body language without listening orally at all. I even have folks wear earplugs so that they can just focus on what they're seeing in their face, what they're seeing in their body. We also do an exercise where instead of taking notes, I have folks draw a diagram of the other person's experience and kind of communicate it visually, which for some people is a lot easier to do, or it kind of helps them understand it better. I even have this too whenever I'm doing it, that I find that when I try to diagram the situation you're telling me about, I have to understand it in a really deep way, in a different way, to know what would symbolically, visually represent this situation. So that's a couple of ways that I invite particularly different kinds of minds to dial into a person using different techniques. Some of them are going to feel really natural and easy. Some of them are going to feel really foreign, but I have them try all of it so that they can also use different parts of their brain and kind of light up different parts of the mind around connecting with that person.
Yeah. Do you, in your training, do you any material like around boundaries, say for that person that's very sensitive, that's just very like emotional and identifies with somebody else's emotion? Do you cover any material to help that person kind of have a little bit more of a boundary? Because like you said, it is exhausting and sometimes it's unhealthy and even sometimes it's dangerous. I can tell you a story, but what's your answer to?
Yeah, absolutely. In all of my trainings, I invite folks to, first of all, become aware of how open they are. And I actually use a kind of scale that I just call honesty, openness, and vulnerability, because those are three different things. And it goes from like naked to undies to pajamas to outfit to workwear, and then formal wear, and then a costume, and then a mascot outfit, right? So from being completely open and vulnerable and honest to being not yourself and completely hidden and kind of protected from anyone seeing anything about you. And I ask folks to think about emotionally where their comfort zone is. I'm probably comfortable more in the pajama to undies area emotionally, where some people are more comfortable in a costume or in formal wear, where there's a very strict sort of alignment with what is expected of them. And so I ask folks to, no matter where they find themselves on that scale, for the duration of the workshop, to take one intentional step in a direction. Either you're going to decide to be a little bit more vulnerable today, or maybe you'll decide to be less vulnerable today. That we want to kind of be in the center, but if you're already in the center, maybe choose one and just be intentional about that. And so then I can give them some tools for being intentional about that, and what does that actually mean in practice? How do I close and open different doors and windows of myself in order to be intentional about what goes in and what goes out?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes also the more emotional might find themselves in situations other folks might take advantage of their kindness, and that happens a lot at work. So I think it's really healthy to have some boundaries and be say no to things, or kind of be. It's good to be a little self-centered within.
Well, it's essential.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's essential to be able to communicate a no.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes that sensitivity and that kindness and that generosity isn't actually kindness and generosity, but it's an inability to say no because of the fear of conflict. And so when I'm working with someone like that, I usually try to have them visualize like what it might mean to say no and what comes up for them when that happens, and when no feels possible and when it doesn't feel possible. For me in my own life, this is something that I have struggled with and that I still sometimes struggle with, that I have recognized that if I do not feel able to say no to someone, that relationship is not safe for me. The relationship isn't safe for me unless I know I can say, I don't want to do that, or you're upsetting me right now, or whatever it is. That's just saying the fact, not being mean, not yelling, not being angry, but just making a boundary, saying no with someone. If I do not feel like I can do that, then I'm not safe in that relationship. And so I think about the first step for me is I need to only share in safe relationships. And I have to have other relationships. There are many relationships in my life that are required that I do not feel safe to say no. But then I have to be careful about what am I sharing, not just of myself, but like what am I giving? What am I offering in that relationship in order to be protected? And I don't consider that being selfish. I consider it being safe. I am the only person who will ever put my safety, my well being, and my happiness first. I'm the only person who can do it. It's my job to do it. It is not selfish and it is not, there's nothing unethical about it. It's a must for all of us to be able to do that because it's like, it's the old cliche about putting on your oxygen mask
Yeah.
first. It's like, if I can't breathe, I can't help you.
Yeah, depends. Well, I mean, but there's so many just different varieties of behaviors that we might encounter in organizations, and it's like a spectrum, right? This whole gamut. But I think it's definitely very healthy and necessary to have some very good personal boundaries. Now, when you're going through this material, I'm just curious, like, what's a common like aha for people in your trainings? Like when a light bulb goes off about something, like what pattern have you recognized about?
Big light bulbs are empathy is not about being nice. Empathy is about being curious
Mm-hmm.
and courageous too. That practicing empathy does not mean that I agree with you, like you, or want you to like me. That empathy can be practiced with the enemy, and it must be in order
Mm-hmm.
for us to be protected as well. We got to be inside of the mind of someone who may have different objectives than we do. I think that's a big aha. I mean, other ahas, I think when folks realize that empathy practice has to start with the self, or maybe not start with, but it has to include the
Mm-hmm.
self, that we think about empathy as me being unselfish and more concerned with you, but I can't actually do that without really deep self awareness. And the self awareness comes from that non judgment and unconditional welcome, which is a kind of love that I have for myself. I have to know myself and fully accept myself. And I got to know what my biases are and where my little slippery bits and trapdoors are in order to know how I am impacting you, what I have to offer you, what I need from you, where I'm safe or unsafe with you. And so I actually have to put myself in a first or very high priority in order to even practice empathy with you. So that's a big surprise to some folks.
Mm-hmm.
And the other surprise, I think, is just particularly in the listening workshop, when I teach folks the tools to dial in with someone, they are usually stunned that they spend a total of maybe 8 minutes in one-on-one
Mm-hmm.
with somebody else listening to them. And they kind of lose their minds of how connected and how known and seen they feel in such a short time, only by intentionally listening with that purpose. It can happen really fast.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, in times when we'll do like design thinking type of workshops or things like that, and we might send people out to the streets, like go talk to people for an hour and come. And for some people come back. Some people come back. It's like a new experience for them, and there's yeah. I mean, even some people have used the term like mind blown. Just that oh, somebody has needs, and I'm aware of it. And some people just don't practice that very much, and for them like that experience, short and somewhat superficial as it is, it's like an awakening for them, like oh wow, I'm like, and we're usually like yeah, it's amazing to talk to people. You learn so much versus reading aggregate data, marketing data with a family that has 2.7 kids. I don't even know what that. Yeah, we were working with a team, the hospitality and travel space, and as we're pre-workshopping something with the team, I'm just noticing the way they're speaking about it. Just something was off. It just seemed like a lot of assumptions, and I was like, "Hey, do you all do blah blah?" And they're like, "Oh no, we don't like that. We don't go there. None of us like to do this type of travel." And I was like, "Oh my god!" so we had to like just add scope, just kind of eat the scope. We supported them in identifying people in their office that like that type of travel. And then like I did a mini workshop with them and then had them go sit down for 30 minutes with these people that like this other type of travel. And this is kind of extra work. So they were a little They did this a little begrudgingly at first, but then after they spoke with people, they were like the doors opened, the lights came on. They were like, wow. I'm like, yeah, just talking to people is awesome. Doing this kind of listen. But just coming back to ahas, I'm curious if does anybody ever pull you aside and they're like, hey Karen, and tell you a story about applying this like outside of work in their lives in some way? Any memorable stories that come up for you?
Yeah, well, it might be the reason my business exists is that the first time I gave this workshop,
Mm-hmm.
I gave it internally at an advertising agency in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there to do ethnographic research, but I didn't get a lot of business because a lot of clients don't have the time. Ethnography is not
Yeah.
a quick
Yeah.
process. And so I didn't often have work to do. So I was on a really neat experimental team of folks who part of our job was to develop training and experiences
Mm-hmm.
for the agency internally. And so when I wasn't busy, I was trying to think of stuff to do. And I thought, I think I'll give a listening workshop, which is when I kind of called on my music training to structure the way that I would teach this. And the first time I offered it at this agency, it was like 75 people came. It was crazy. I mean, usually we had 12 or
Mm-hmm.
15 people in a workshop, and it was just so many people wanted to come.
Wow.
And we had to kind of remove walls and make room. It was really cool. And the next day, as I was in the next couple of days, as I was walking through the halls, like folks would come up to me and say that it helped them with a client problem or it helped them with a team problem. But then this one woman told me, oh, it might make me emotional. She said, after your workshop, I went home and my husband and I had the first real conversation that we've had in a long time. And I think it might have saved the marriage.
Wow.
And I thought, whoa, I'm onto something here. There's something in this that's really powerful. So I gave the workshop again
Mm-hmm.
because so many people heard about it that weren't able to come. It's about a 400-person agency. And I gave it again, and I had, I think, 65 people the second time. And the demand was so high, and
Wow.
folks were just reporting such big successes
Mm-hmm.
inside and outside of work that when I inevitably got laid off
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't have enough billable hours,
Yeah.
yeah, then I went on my own. And now that's the foundation of the work that I'm doing.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I've had stories of people that they're using design thinking to like they'll come over and they'll be, I'm applying this at my condo to help people recycle more. Or I've
Yeah.
seen people even apply it to their church, like the experience of the congregation. Like I might see like a Miro board. I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, oh wow, look, they're
Mhm.
working this out. That's so awesome. So you were mentioning ethnography. So let's jump into that. And obviously,
Mhm.
as you said, your empathy curriculum is derived from your ethnographic practice. So just to this again, define terms here for listeners because ethnography is not a tell me what is ethnography.
Ethnography is, if we just kind of break down the word, it is a record of culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's recording or writing about culture. And of course, that's a little oversimplified,
Mm-hmm.
but that really is the essence of what it is. Ethnography is a really beautiful, in my opinion, immersive style of qualitative research. So not focused on the numbers, but maybe focused on the stuff that's hard to measure. And that work is practiced by spending time with people in the context of their lives. So, not in a research facility, not in a focus group or giving a survey. I mean, I've done that kind of work too. Clients often like that kind of work. You can do it a lot faster and cheaper. But ethnography is really about understanding someone's real life in the context of their life. So, when I was working as an ethnographer, I was traveling a lot. I would go to people's homes. I would go with them to work. I would commute with them, eat dinner with their families
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. I've witnessed folks in all kinds of situations in order to understand it's really a walk in your shoes style of research. And sometimes that's literal. I haven't done it with shoes, but I had a client that was a furniture designer that wanted to understand office furniture. And so I would sit in their chairs so I could feel where things are and what they need and what they see from where they are. And that's a somatic empathy practice, by the way. It's like to really physically experience what they're experiencing. So ethnography it helps us find what we may not have even known to look for. Quantitative research often tells us more about what we already know
Mm-hmm.
that we need to know about. It can confirm hunches or it can kind of determine a direction to go in. But ethnography can really be surprising because very often I find something that I wasn't looking for at all that then opens a door of insight into some other areas of curiosity. And now we're in a very deep place where we're not just understanding the thing that we know about or that we want to know about, but we're understanding all the things around that, the factors that are shaping behavior that are very deep, that maybe come from a place of deep belief or deep fear, spiritual factors, community factors, you know, all kinds of unknowns that I don't know till I'm there. I don't
Mhm.
know till I go, wait a minute, what is that over there? Or like, tell me about that photograph, or see things in action that kind of create those aha
Yeah.
moments.
And then if you, again, for the more skeptical client, and you're already unpacking some of these benefits, like connect the dots some more about the benefits of ethnography, like what value can it unlock if you decide to like apply.
Well, I have the most experience applying it to marketing, advertising,
Mhm.
branding, product design, this kind of thing, and also innovation. So, and it's great for innovation because of those surprise insights that come. In terms of marketing, there are always places where I'm going to find something a lot deeper to connect with and message to in that audience, in that person. When I'm with someone and I'm really understanding where their loyalty or non-loyalty comes from with regard to the brand or the product, then that messaging can be shaped in a way that really reaches them in the truest place, in the deepest place. But in terms of design and innovation, I think it's terrific for uncovering possibility, for even generating opportunity, finding things that haven't been found or places we haven't gone, products that don't exist, services that we didn't know we needed or that we didn't need until recently or whatever it is. So that those are the kinds of insights that we
Yeah.
get.
Well, what's your response when somebody's, because this lived experience probably for both of us, when
Mhm.
somebody says like, "Hey, let's just do a survey."
Mhm. Well,
What?
if you send someone multiple choice, then they can only give you an answer you've already thought of. If you want to know more than you do right now, you got to ask them an open-ended question and let them ramble for a long time.
Yeah.
I usually tell the Febreze story, which I love so much.
I think so.
Febreze is,
PN.
yeah, it's a destinculator.
Mhm.
It's a spray that removes odors, and it was designed for smokers and cat ladies,
Mhm.
but they were not buying it. And they didn't know why they weren't buying it. So they sent ethnographers to their homes to talk to them. And the ethnographers are there in these stinky houses and they're talking about all kinds of stuff and they're building rapport. They're doing the things we do. They're having a cup of coffee. They're like walking around. They're
Mhm.
talking about fabrics. And then the question comes, so what do you do about the smell? And they always go, what smell?
Mhm.
Because they didn't smell
Yeah.
it. So put a pin in that. They were like, okay, these people don't even know that they have a problem. We can't market to them because they don't, this is not an issue. They don't care. So what they did was they pivoted and they did more ethnography
Mhm.
with the people who were buying the product. And these people were absolute clean freaks whose houses were immaculate. And they were saying, well, what do you use this for? And they were using it as a finishing touch spray after everything was all cleaned and totally, there was no smell to cover up. They were just using it as a kind of
Mhm.
way to make the place seem a little bit more icing on the
Mhm.
cake. And so they marketed to those people. They marketed to these type A clean freak folks as, and then it took off and then it became really big. And then 20 years later, they had the brand authority and the established position as a brand to do the nose blindness campaign where they did funny commercials about people not smelling their own stink.
Mhm.
And that was a huge success. And all of that is because of ethnography.
Yeah. I know of an organization that spends tens of thousands of dollars and they just don't invest in any ethnographic work. And they
Yeah.
kind of still struggle to connect with audiences. And I have a friend who works there, and it's kind of crazy making something that let's see your take on this. Something I might say to somebody invested in surveys is like, hey, a survey is it's a great way to take the pulse on something that already exists. From 1 to 5, how comfortable is this chair, right? Or very finite that's existing, but is you can't do discovery with a survey. I don't know. I
Well,
mean, what's your take or what's your spiel?
I immediately
Yeah.
tell folks there are two different kinds of research.
Mhm.
There is discovery seeking, opportunity seeking research, and solution-seeking research.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunity seeking or solution seeking. So, and I have a list of the qualities of these research and what kind of methods do it. Like, start with discovery research. This is going to be open-ended. We're going to increase the variables. We're going to do a broad scope. We're going to look at the folks that are on the edges of the demographic or that are kind of unusual users to find really where the edge pieces of the puzzle are. Once we have some ideas, we can test them doing solution seeking research. That's when we can do a focus group to see if folks like it, or we can send a survey to see how much they would pay for it, or whatever it is that we want to find out about that. So it's like, this is an order of operations situation. And both of the kinds of research are valuable, but when folks come to me wanting a discovery, but they want me to do it with solution seeking tools, that's not going to work.
I'll second that. So I think the story of how you started with ethnography is interesting and it bears repeating here. Tell me about.
Well, I went to music school first. And then after music school, I went to art school. And I'm trying to make the story a little bit shorter. And it was because when I started to study contemporary music, had all these really interesting, expansive, conceptual sort of elements that were a lot more like performance art than traditional music. So I went to school for performance art. And I started working with something that I called audience specificity, which was really creating work for particular groups. And a lot of art kind of pretends to be for the public, but it actually requires a degree to even understand it. And I didn't like that exclusivity, but I also thought if we're going to dog whistle to a particular group, I don't want it to be other artists and people who studied art. I want it to be the people who I actually want to talk to. So I thought I'm going to choose the people first, get to know them, interview them, live with them, spend time with them. Maybe they make the piece with me as well, learn their cultural language and create something that they can receive that doesn't feel so foreign or conceptual that they don't even know what it is. And I started doing that. I loved doing that. And then after art school, I became a yoga teacher because I needed to do something for work. And you'll never believe this, but there aren't a lot of jobs in performance art. So one of my yoga students was asking me about my work, and I told him about this work in audience specificity. And he said, "Oh, you're doing ethnographic art." And that was the first time I'd heard the word. And he described to me what ethnography was. And I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And he had an innovation consultancy that specialized in ethnographic discovery. And he gave me my first opportunity just writing field notes for the sociologists. And that went really well. And a whole new career started. So I was trained through the head of sociology at that agency, and Dr. Thomas Lohr. He's in Germany and is still a dear friend, but he helped me to be more scientific about my approach because I had kind of invented it just out of my own curiosity and spiritual practice. And so he said, okay, well, let me show you how we do this as scientists. and that was also really great and cool and expansive and helped me to broaden my versatility and my skills. And then what's really funny is that I've kind of come full circle to a place where I am back to kind of doing performance art, but it's not as weird and spooky as the work that I did as an artist, but it is definitely performative and definitely an experience design situation where I'm creating experiences for communities in their language, in their cultural style to expand their consciousness. And that's exactly what I did as an artist. So I feel very grateful that I'm able to kind of still work with the same tools creatively.
Yeah. So given that background, I'm curious to hear about, so in learning ethnographic practice, what came more naturally for you and what was more challenging for you to learn?
I think dialing into a person one-on-one and really just making the whole world disappear except that person was super natural for me. I had a very deep capacity to connect with almost any person one-on-one. And that part was, I was also able to make people comfortable on camera because I was often doing this research on video, which makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. Yeah. And I was pretty good at helping them to forget about the camera and just be with me. So that was really cool. What was hard for me, I think, I'm remembering maintaining my objectivity after I'd already fallen in love with my research subjects was really tough. I think that was really hard. A lot of times when I heard a story that really moved me, or when I discovered something that I felt passionate about, when I went back to my team or back to the client to report those stories, I often had an unbalanced connection to the person where I felt like I was advocating for them personally,
Mm.
which is something that I love about myself as a human
Hmm.
being, but it was not scientific. Like that was really hard for me to let go. And it was also hard for me to analyze things in terms of, it was hard for me to remove the scientific process involves removing quite a lot of human things. The human things are the material,
Mm.
but the process is not human. The process is very mechanical and kind of sterile. It has to be. And so I was very good at the human part. And I found it challenging to impose these kind of external structures on all of this deep and juicy, bloody and sweaty stuff I was discovering,
Mhm.
because I didn't want to cut it into cubes and sterilize it like that. But it's a necessary piece in order for it to be science. And that was a little tough.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I definitely perceive what you're sharing. I think trying to exercise more discernment of where the boundary between science and scientism. So scientism is, it can be its own trap. So we might want to welcome some of those messy, sweaty human things in and process that in a different way. But I agree. I mean, you do need like a boundary and kind of to
Mhm.
compartmentalize that in certain ways, especially if you apply it to business. But we can have a conversation about that another day. If you also to so curious to hear if not, it's a deeply human thing as you're pointing out. So I'm curious that has the practice changed you in some way?
I don't want to seem like I'm making more of it than it really is. But I really believe that to practice ethnography well, to practice observation well, to practice unconditional welcome well, requires a kind of focus and discipline and presence that is itself immediately spiritually transcendent.
Mm.
And nobody told me that. Nobody. And I
Mm.
honestly, maybe there are researchers who don't experience that. But when I'm with someone entirely focused on them, having shut out the world, and I'm also holding myself back because I don't inject myself into the research, only enough to make a human connection, but not enough to change direction or influence things. Or so I'm withholding a lot. I'm resisting that impulse to jump in with something to say. I'm resisting the impulse to react emotionally to what I'm hearing. I'm resisting the impulse to get excited and even to positively, as well as I'm resisting judgment.
Mhm.
And when I hold all that back and I just kind of look someone in the eye and be present with them and hear what they have to say, I find it the closest to what I've heard liberation described. I remember the first time it happened, and I felt a surge of energy move up through my spine. I felt my heart expand to the point where it kind of hurt. Like it was this kind of break open feeling of infinite energy and light, which is, I know, sounds really spooky and sci-fi or maybe just new agey or something,
Mhm.
but it was real. And I have it every time. I have it every time I get into that place. And so it made me want to be in that place more often. And it
Mhm.
made me try to practice that with people that I love, because I don't often practice with the people that I love.
Mhm.
It was just my work for a long time. And
Mhm.
so when I was with the people in my life, then I just relax and I interrupt with my own feelings and I say all this stuff. And then I think sometimes I would remember, wait a minute, why don't you just try listening the way that you do as a professional? And it's really good to do. It's also good in our real relationships to share and be open and not to be a non-neutral person, but to practice sometimes that that really beautiful discipline of allowing the moment to be full of something that's not me. I think that's shaped the way that I make relationships, and it's
Mhm.
shaped the what I believe about relationships.
Mhm.
I find relationships really difficult, and
We all though.
I know, but like so many people assume that I'm really great at it because of
Mm,
what I teach.
mm,
And I'm like, no,
mm,
I get frustrated and angry and feel cheated as often as anybody else. Like I still have those feelings of injustice. And I'm also really difficult to deal with.
mm,
I'm fussy and I talk too much and I want things the way that I want them. And I'm emotionally unbearable sometimes. So it's like I'm not, I haven't transcended being embodied in human form,
mhm.
unfortunately.
I mean, there's something powerful in, at least in my own experience, in kind of switching. One thing is, and I don't even know how I do this, it just happens, but like the listening, I don't have good language to explain this, but there's like levels or modes of listening. And when I go into like deep research listening mode, it's like what you're describing. It's just, you're so dialed. And there's something about being, I call it like witness mode, like being in witness mode when you're not judging or you're just witnessing. That's also really powerful to be in the act of doing it. But I think it's also really beautiful when somebody's doing it, like somebody's witnessing you. Yeah.
This is why I've structured the workshop, that listening workshop, the way that I have, because I don't, it's people do the exercises in pairs
Hmm.
rather than, for example, having a group of people just witness two people doing it. I mean, that's another experience, but I like people not only to practice listening, but to experience what it's like to be heard. And that's usually what motivates them to want to be good at it. Because they're like, oh man, if I could make somebody feel like this, it's pretty great.
Yeah. Do you apply any ethnographic skill?
Oh my God, yeah. I'm actually kind of, I am like, I'm a pretty killer gift giver, honestly. I'm almost competitive about it.
Hmm.
Like, I really, I like to, I also really enjoy birthdays.
Hmm.
I don't do a lot of winter holiday stuff because I find it to be overwhelming and high stress.
Yeah.
And so I don't do gift giving for
Hmm.
Christmas or whatever. But on people's birthdays, I go wild. Yeah. I really like to make this day like the day that is
Hmm.
all about them and like what can bring them joy and what can make them feel seen and known and loved and celebrated.
Yeah. So
How about you? You do that too?
yeah, with my partner, like I just have an ethnographic eye, so I'm just kind of noticing her day, what's going on, what she's doing, and I'm like, where, and my whole, like a big piece of my life is like just alleviating human suffering and making life better for people, right? So I'm like, how can I make her day to day better? And like, let me figure out something. So
Mm-hmm.
generally, I generally nail it because she uses my gifts like every day and she loves it. So I take pride in that, you know. And I figured I would ask you because as an ethnographer, it's like sometimes you can't quite turn it off. I'll be like in a coffee shop or something. I'm always observing people. I'm always like
Mm-hmm.
just paying attention to. It's fun. I get a kick out of it. But I mean, we already touched on the ethnography being this embodied full sensory experience. So like doing like interviews over the internet, it's convenient, but you're missing out on smells and sensations and like
Yeah.
lighting and texture and so much. So can you give me just a couple of brushstrokes about your approach to observing and asking questions and listening deeply with somebody in that embodied?
In the in-person
Hmm.
context? Yeah. Do you mean like techniques or you mean ideas
No,
or
just give me some brushstrokes. Like to people, are you loud or are you kind of more just try to make yourself kind of invisible?
I try to make myself
Yeah.
invisible. And when I'm training someone or when I have someone coming with me, I have this whole list of kind of requirements of them
Mm-hmm.
that usually surprises them. And I didn't know that I had all these requirements until I brought someone with me who, in my opinion, did everything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, oh, I need to tell him, first of all, wear quiet shoes. Do not wear noisy shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was part of it's like, if you're going to follow someone around, it will make them nervous if they're hearing every step that you take.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are things like that where, I mean, I actually even thought about it for this interview that I'm wearing earrings that I would not wear as a researcher because these tell you something about my personality that I don't want to be interesting to my subject.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to wear them with you because I don't mind if your people find me
Mhm.
interesting. But like the shirt is almost, you wouldn't ever remember it. It's just a plain shirt. Like, so there are things like that where the way that I present myself, I would try to be uninteresting as much as possible because I don't want them to be reacting to me. I don't want them to like me and want me to like them because that's going to totally distort everything that they tell me. But I also don't want them to be repulsed by me or to not like me.
Mhm.
So I have to just be kind of a nothing presence. And what's interesting is that's actually really hard to do because not because I'm so interesting, but because every person is a person.
Mhm.
Like just the fact that, for example, that I'm a white woman, some people will have feelings and thoughts about just that, and that I'm not necessarily a neutral presence for someone,
Mhm.
that I have the body that I have, that my voice sounds like this, that there are things about me that I can't really change that are still going to impact another person. And that's where the self-awareness practice comes in, is that I've got to know that there are some situations that I'm not going to be able to be invisible in. And if, for example, I had a client that needed insight about that situation, I might send someone else. I might send someone who could more effectively blend in to that environment. So that's one thing. I find it really interesting to balance warmth with distance
Mhm.
because I do want the person to feel comfortable enough
Mhm.
to open up and be honest with me, but I don't want them to feel attached, connected to me. I want them to be able to say no to me. I want them to be able to disagree with me. I want them
Mhm.
to be able to tell me something unpleasant. And so I always find it really challenging. And I've definitely failed at times
Mhm. Yeah.
on either direction. But I find the practice interesting because my self-awareness has to be so high for me to know exactly what I'm doing. When do I smile? How much do I smile? How much do I let them see how I feel about what they're saying? There was a moment one time that a woman I was speaking to went so deep and opened up so much and was so vulnerable that I turned the camera off
Yeah.
because I felt like I was exploiting her vulnerability.
Mhm.
It was just she had I didn't and also the thing she was sharing was too much for I don't want to say too much. It was more than the client would have been interested in.
Mhm.
She was sharing some really difficult trauma,
Yeah.
which was contextual for some of her insight. But I just felt like I never want a group of executives to be listening to this
Yeah.
thing that she's actually only giving me because she's giving it to me
Yeah.
because I connected with her.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that story to be on a tape somewhere in an office building.
Yeah.
And I stopped and I turned it off and I ended up crying with her and talking to her. And it was just at that moment, it was like, it's a little bit too human to have a camera on right
Yeah.
now. And yeah, her
Yeah.
name was Stephanie and she was really
Yeah.
cool.
I understand. I mean, the way I do it, I keep the raw data. I don't release it. Like I process it and then I
Yeah.
really try to keep people's privacy. So I totally. So I just want to like jump into the time machine and go back and just get a few notes of your journey up to now. And I know, as you mentioned, that early on you were a musician. And so what and where you played?
I was a violist
Hmm.
and I went to school at the University of Southern Mississippi to study viola performance there. And I played in the college orchestra there, but I also played in the Natchez Opera and some the Meridian Symphony Orchestra and some kind of it was a special school. The music school was really good. So we were also the working orchestra for the whole state of Mississippi, basically. And we would all travel to go and play. So we were playing professionally
Hmm.
as soon as we started college, and I went to college early. So
Yeah.
I was playing professionally from the time I was a teenager.
Wow.
And then my viola professor and I both transferred to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And then I played in the local symphonies there in Kalamazoo and Battle
Mhm.
Creek and Lansing and Grand Rapids for a few years. Yeah, it was a really special time. I sometimes miss it, but you
Mhm.
do have to practice a lot to keep up the skills.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm curious about, so give me some brushstrokes around like the evolution of your experience playing for audiences over the years. So Karen
Mhm.
started at age X, playing out of tune for family or whomever, and then you're
Mhm.
playing like toward the end of your journey, playing professionally. Like, just give me a few notes
Yeah.
about that arc.
I think I have been kind of a performer
Mm,
from the beginning.
mhm,
And I was also a pretty quiet child. And I, as soon as I was very into poetry and I would write poems and write letters, and I was like really pretty quiet to myself and also could not resist the stage.
mhm,
And so I've always struggled with definitions about introvert extrovert
mhm,
because I have always felt absolutely both of those
mhm,
things. And my mother was the music minister at the church that our family
mhm,
went to. And so she was also on stage directing music every week. And so then I was too. Once I was a musician, I was also up there singing or playing the viola or conducting the choir or leading the audience in singing. And that was just a normal part of life. And I think it was very
mhm,
hard for me later in life, like after music, because then I went to music school
mhm,
and we all played for each other and with each other.
mhm,
And there wasn't a kind of being on stage wasn't considered being attention seeking. Everyone was on stage. We had to be on stage.
mhm,
And so when I kind of entered the world of non performers and found that there was an idea that if you were on stage that you were attention seeking, it was really hard for me because I was like,
mhm,
oh no, I'm actually just trying to give you this thing that I made for you. Like I'm
mhm,
this is an offering that I'm making. I'm not
mhm,
asking you
mhm,
for applause. I'm offering you something. And and that has really shaped my philosophy for even facilitation and workshops. And when I'm training folks, I teach them that whenever you're on stage, you are at least asking for people's time. And so what you offer should be a gift and not an additional request. They're giving you so much. And so it's like, this should be, I'm giving to you, not you're giving to me. If, and we've all seen performers that kind of want more from their audiences. You can tell that they need it. They need to be there and they need the applause and they need the laughs and they need the whatever. And it can be okay, but
mhm.
it should also be worth it. Like,
Yeah,
please give me something in return.
yeah.
So I learned that from music performing. And there were some other really important lessons, one of which is particularly in classical music, particularly in orchestral music,
Mhm,
the show must go on. Like
yeah.
it's once we've started, we are going to keep going until we finished. If you have to sneeze, too bad. You may not. It's like this, it's a kind of resilience
Mhm,
about you can't just walk off stage. There's no doing that. It's not
mm,
a it's not an option. And whatever you need to do to make this happen must be done. And of course there are always exceptions and of course that can be taken to a toxic
yeah.
level. But in general, I'm very proud of having gained that resilience to go, yeah, being on stage matters. And when I'm here, I'm holding the space and I'm not walking off. I'm not quitting. I'm staying in touch with the people I'm speaking to for the duration. There's no giving up. And that's a very helpful skill
Mhm,
to have to be able to do that. As I moved into performance art, I started discovering a little bit more about myself as a performer because the other thing
mm,
about being on stage in the orchestra is that you can hide in the orchestra.
mm,
Everyone is wearing all black
mhm,
and no one is looking at specifically me. I mean, they can see me, but it's not about me. It's a team sport. And as a performance artist, it was often just me on stage. And then I discovered that I am very nervous. Like it's like, oh, I do have nerves. I do get really scared.
mhm,
And so that was another place of discovery for me in terms of what I am doing with stage time. And it's continued to morph. I still really do enjoy it. I also do like comedy storytelling now, and I do other kinds of performances that I just personally kind of need to be a part of. I need to be a part of performance. I think for the same reasons as when I was talking about ethnography, the presence of being with someone like that is spiritually transcendent. I think performance has this quality as well
mm,
because of that, the presence and the time and the just, it's a non casual, it's a very intentionally spent time.
mhm,
And I think that intention and the time and the presence feels very deep to me.
yeah.
So I always want to do that, even though it definitely looks like I'm an applause junkie, and I might also be an applause junkie.
Yeah. Well, so give me a couple of notes here about what did you learn about connecting with audience and moving people emotionally as a musician or
What did I learn about that? Because I grew up in with church music,
Mhm.
and I don't mean to be disrespectful here because I know that the highest intention of the church music is to sort of give an offering to God, but let's put a pin in that. It's also intended to create an emotional atmosphere for the people in the church. And there's a lot of intention about bringing the audience to a particular kind of place of emotional experience. And even just like the sort of order of the things that happen
Mhm.
when you would start with the invitational music and then your first prelude and then your sorry, the invitational's at the end. The prelude is at the beginning, but you kind of there are pieces that you might play at the beginning but you wouldn't play in the middle. There are places for certain things where it's like, "Oh, this is for when they're coming in. And this is for when we're
Yeah.
kind of getting them to getting their energy up. And this is for when we're getting them involved. And this is for
Mhm.
after they hear that, we want them to have a moment of reflection. And then this is for want them to really feel something. And this is when we want them to take action on that. And then this is how we say goodbye." And so like all of that, all those intentional things kind of taught me about experience
Yeah.
design with music. How do we use music to give folks an arc or build to a big climax or whatever it is? And that's just always been a fact of life for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a hard time coming up with an answer to that at first because I can't remember a time that I learned it.
Mhm.
It was really from the beginning, but it's always been about where am I taking them? How am I taking them there? How fast am I taking them there? Where do I want them to go? And what do I want them to do once they get there?
Yeah. Have you ever seen interviews with Yoma?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's fantastic. So I have a good friend who works at the New World Symphony here in Miami, and he tells me stories of Yoma sometimes coming there to coach. They're like postgraduates, and Yoma, he's unconcerned about technique because the people who go there are like freaks, right? They're like freaky
Yeah.
good, freaks in a good way.
Yes.
So and so they're still like wrapped up in my technique, and Yoma is like, nah, don't worry about that. And he really
Yeah.
dials in on the emotion and channeling emotion and projecting it and connecting with people. I'm curious if any of that came up for you during your training and how you, if it did, how you wielded it or handled it.
Yeah. I think that part was sort of why I was a bit of a natural at it, is because
Mm.
that part was the easiest part. And
So the church had already baked it into your nervous system.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Okay.
But I think I'm thinking about when I was teaching it to my first
Mm.
intern,
Mhm.
Darren, who was really my experience teaching Darren was really transformative for me because some of the
Mhm.
stuff I didn't even know that I knew it until he
Mhm.
didn't know it and
Mhm.
I had to tell it to
Mhm.
him. And so, yeah, I think like reading body language and reading communication style and being able to I remember Darren and I talking about how to know when someone was uncomfortable
Mhm.
and what cues they'd give you or when someone might not be giving you a full answer. And how do you adjust for that? How would you adapt to that? How would you make that person more comfortable? And then one sorry, I'm just remembering all these things. But I remember something that I told Darren, which I tell people all the time, which is that the best way to trick someone into thinking you care about them is to care about them. And
Yeah.
so if it's I need to make sure this person can trust me, and the best way to trick them into trusting me is to be trustworthy. It's like if I want someone to feel relaxed with me, then I have to give them that trust and that care and that safety. And the only way to like manipulate them into feeling that way is to just give them that.
Mhm.
Just really, how can I make them safe? How can I make sure that they're safe and that they can trust me
Mhm.
and that I am actually worthy of that trust?
So later on, and you already acknowledged this, that you were a yoga practitioner and instructor. So tell me about your relationship with your yoga practice. What kind of changes did
Mm.
that bring about for you? What
Mhm.
unfolded?
I started playing or practicing yoga when I was playing viola professionally because I
Mm.
also had debilitating tension headaches,
Oh,
really severe
okay.
just neck and shoulders,
Yeah.
and relievers weren't really doing it. And so when I discovered yoga, I was it was such a huge gift to
Mm.
be able to do something for myself, which was not just like learning how to use my body mindfully and knowing how to respond to my body with either stretching or strengthening as needed, but also gave me stress management tools that I did not have at that time. I started when I was about 19. I started doing yoga.
Mhm.
And the meditation aspect was interesting to me, but it wasn't really like why I was there. And I sort of just it felt kind of boring. Like we were just kind of sitting, like, let's do the exercise part or the
Mhm.
stretching part. That is what was going to give me the immediate relief.
Mhm.
And so that part of my practice, the spiritual part of the practice, didn't really come along for me until I did my teacher training. I think that was when I was just practicing as a young person. I found it relaxing, but I didn't really know, I didn't really understand what the sitting was for. And when I did my teacher training and I learned more about the origins of yoga and the full 8 limbs of yoga and the fact that the physical practice is only one of the 8 limbs and that there are many other kinds of practices involved in the yoga kind of work, I got more interested and I also found more of like kind of dialed into more of the techniques and the approaches that resonated with me. Like I studied Ashtanga and Iyengar, which are almost opposite forms. So one is very active and fast paced and energetic and maybe more concerned with movement. And Iyengar is almost passive, supported on props a lot of the time,
Mhm.
very low impact, but it's all about alignment and safety and placement and intention and not at all that kind of fast moving sort of energetic movement stuff. And they're a really good complement to each other.
Mhm.
It's almost like a yin and yang.
Mhm.
And so I practiced them together and I still get a lot out of both of those practices, though I found now as I'm getting older that I definitely have a gentler practice than I used to have. And it's no longer important to me to try to do the most advanced poses. I'm now just kind of doing what's safe for my body to do. And now the sitting part is the most important part.
Mm.
And it's really that being present and checking in with myself. And I'm so grateful to even have the tools to be able to do that. I cannot tell you how many people don't even know when I invite them
Mhm.
to just visualize even their own mind or their inside their body, they don't know how. And they
Mhm.
say like, what do you mean? Or teaching someone to do that is so special because it's a gift that stays
Yeah.
forever.
Well, how does this have an influence in how you show up in your business?
I have a number of techniques that I do in order to remain present while I'm facilitating.
Mm-hmm.
Because performing is one thing. You can actually stay pretty focused when you're performing in a non-interactive
Mm-hmm.
situation. But facilitating, because it's so interactive and because it depends on the participation of everyone there, so many variables, so many things can go sideways. I can get pulled into a conversation with someone, or if something goes wrong, I have to create a new exercise or change the format or whatever it is. And so it's important for me to remain present and intentional. And so there are a couple of things that I do before I walk into that situation. And there are techniques that I use that are specifically yoga and meditation techniques that I use while I'm facilitating in order to maintain that awareness. And one of them I'll just share with you because it's kind of funny is that I put a rock in my shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me when I'm performing. It helps
Mm-hmm.
me to deal with nervousness.
Mm-hmm.
And when I step on the rock and it kind of brings my energy down into my feet so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel like it's effervescent and like bubbling up. But when I'm facilitating, it just reminds me to be all the way here
Mm-hmm.
and not to take anything for granted, to do what you came to
Yeah.
do.
No, it's really cool. So, Karen,
Mhm.
so we're gonna start winding down our conversation, and the name of this podcast of this project is "Making Business Art." What comes up for you when you hear that phrase? What meaning do you make of it?
I mean, I hear it as making business into art. And I appreciate that very much because for better or for worse, beauty is very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have sometimes been a huge pain in the butt because I don't want to work with any materials or activities or words that are not beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I want the participants to experience harmonious aesthetics. And I believe that those things create internal harmony as well. And so I do try to create experiences that feel like art, that feel like receiving a very beautiful gift. And I am not a very good business person. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that. And it's kind of hilarious because I get asked to speak to business owners and to CEOs and leaders all the time about certain aspects of running a business. And I can speak to certain aspects about running a
Mm-hmm.
business, but in my own life as a founder and CEO, I am really bad at business. And it's because I care a lot more about beauty than I care about money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I don't work hard enough to make my business grow financially because I'm always trying to make it more beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give it more integrity. Can it be deeper? Can it be simpler?
Mm-hmm.
Can it be more beautiful? Can it reach people in a more long lasting way? And I love being there and playing in that sandbox. But the business part is, I mean, I want to make all business into art.
Well, so do I. But you know what? I'll just say I receive what you're saying, but I think you're also being a little hard on yourself. I think that's why we have teams. And the beauty of a team is that different people bring different strengths. And I think delivering something with a great deal of care is
Mm-hmm.
really where the magic happens. And then kind of the sustainability part, you can find other people who can support you or support us in strengthening those areas of our business. But I also want to acknowledge, so you have a TED talk or TEDx talk that's really
I
cool.
do. Yeah. Thank you.
Um, and art is about transformation. And in that talk, you acknowledge that you grew up, you experienced a sustained trauma in your younger years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you also have managed to transform that pain into gifts. Can you just
Mm-hmm.
give me a couple notes about that process? Like, what are the gifts developed or transformed?
Yeah. My early life was perforated with quite a lot of violence and sexual abuse, which is for many years until I left home when I was 15, from the time I was 3 until I was 15. And that kind of trauma, long term trauma, which results in complex post traumatic stress, one of the qualities of that condition is hypervigilant attention to the mood states of other people. I mean,
Mm,
so just one of the symptoms was immediately valuable. Not everybody monetizes it, but I found that's why I was kind of snatched up by the ethnography team, because they were like, "Oh, you do the part that's the hardest to teach and you do it naturally." And so, however, I was doing it from a place of anxiety and fear. And what's changed now, which I'm so grateful for, is that I do not do it out of fear now. And now I do it as a practice. And I do sometimes turn it off. So it's not the same, it's become a skill rather than a default mode, which I'm very grateful for. I think also my childhood experiences, and I don't want to say that this is always the case, particularly for sexual abuse, which is incredibly consequential, immeasurably, inexpressibly consequential, particularly for children. But I do think, for better and for worse, both, it created in me a boundaryless presence of being.
mm,
I had my personal boundaries were not honored at all.
mm,
And so I had no boundary for a long time,
mm,
which created a lot more problems and also allowed a lot more abuses to occur. However, it has also enabled me to deeply and quickly connect emotionally and spiritually and sometimes physically with people, with almost any kind of person,
mm,
almost. And again, that's not always awesome.
Hmm.
But it's very special for the kind of work that I do.
Yeah.
So I am still in the process of learning how to make that into a skill and not a default mode. Um, Learning how to create a boundary for myself, learning how to say no, learning how to enforce that no. And this is something I can only say to myself, and I would never say to another survivor of abuse. But I really do believe that abuse was part of the purpose of this life for me.
Mm.
That I came here with a very deep and important mission, and that I got to work on it right away
Mhm.
by walking through something that immediately brought me to that place of incredible challenge and incredible
Yeah.
gifts. So I feel really grateful for it. I don't, I mean, I certainly still struggle sometimes with lots of different aspects of my interior, but in large part, I feel very grateful that I have been given a very uncommon life and a very
Mm.
uncommon experience of others. So it's something that I would never wish on another person, but there's nothing that you could offer me that would make me want to take it away from my
Yeah.
life.
So I have a question that I use rarely, but I just felt bring it up in this conversation. And so this is not like an ego, like a me, ego, your name, identity question, but it's kind of big. And the question is, what wants to be expressed through your life?
Love. Easy. It's not easy. But
Yeah.
what I was just saying about my purpose, I don't really know what I believe about past lives or whatever, but if it's true that we come here intentionally with a mission to do, let's say it is. I feel like the events in my life, the type of abuse, the amount of abuse, the length of the abuse was so much
Mm.
that it just doesn't make any sense except that it was part of it, that it's important. And so I think, okay, if that's important, what's it important for? And I believe that I am here to learn about and teach about love.
Mm.
And what that means for me is, I mean, I know love is like it's one of those big giant words that we all use differently. It's like God or whatever. Like,
Mhm.
it's like, I don't
Mhm.
think it means what you think it means. But it's for me, that's learning about care, learning about trust, safety, judgment. What is harm? What is connection? All those things are my working materials. They are what I am working on and what I am working with. And I think it is my job to continue to learn about it, to teach about it, and to offer people experiences of being unconditionally welcomed, which is the same as love. But I don't say love because it freaks people out
Mhm.
and it's business, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's what we're made of. I mean, I think
Yeah. I
that's the life
I
force.
have a friend with whom we're going to had an interview previously to record a mini-sode about work with love because he has that in his email signature. And I was like, hey, let's record it. And he's a little nervous about it because of what you're saying, it's business, but he's like leaning into that. So we're gonna do a mini-sode. I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah. I also think
Mhm.
that in the same way that I don't think empathy is necessarily squishy, I don't think love is squishy either. Love is brave and raw and powerful and can be terrifying and can be painful. And it's like, love isn't necessarily little pink hearts. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Love is not for the weak.
Yeah, for sure.
It's big energy. And I think it's really cool energy. And it's a great thing to work with because it's also a limitless supply.
It really is. Well, Karen, we have to land this plane today. So let me ask you a few lightning round questions and then I'll open up the
Okay.
floor for you to share what you have going on. First question is, what's the last piece of media that you loved? That can be a book, a movie, a podcast, or anything.
Okay. This was not super recent, but I discovered it recently, which was the Netflix series Beef.
Okay.
It's a limited series. I think it's just one season. And it is an absolutely unbelievable, transformative story of how a tiny misunderstanding escalated and escalated and escalated. And then I don't want to give it away, but
Mm,
like breaks through to an experience of absolute transformative love and empathy. And
mm,
I have barely seen anything written so well. It is, I recommend it to almost everybody. It's kind of like, I didn't recommend it to my spiritual teacher because I was like, I don't even think it's a little too violent for you.
mm,
I was like, I don't
mhm.
think you're going to like it. But it's wonderful. I think Beef was just, it was perfect
Excellent.
in every way.
Next question. What is something that inspired?
Water,
Mm,
I live on the Hudson
yeah.
River, and the river
Mhm.
never fails me. It never lets me down. There's always something. And sometimes it's the light on the surface of the water, sometimes it's an otter swimming by, sometimes it's the way that it freezes, sometimes it's but I get a lot out of water.
Love that. What's a song or band that you must play during a solo road
Well, if I'm very honest, I have to pass because I haven't learned to drive yet, so I've never been on a solo road trip. But
or passenger on the road trip? What might you be like, "Hey, let's listen to."
Andrew Bird is an artist that I really love.
Mm,
Andrew Bird is a violinist
mhm.
with a band and a songwriter, and I love everything that he makes. He's from the Chicago area, and I got to play with him as a backup violist a long time ago.
Cool.
He has a special meaning to me. But yeah, Bird is cool.
Very nice. And finally, what do you want to see more of in the world?
Skillful truth telling.
Mm,
It's an election year, and I keep witnessing really poorly done political arguments. And I would just really love to see folks get beyond personal attacks and us and them thinking and get to the fact that in a very deep way, I believe that our values across the country are very similar. How those values are expressed and how they may best be protected are the things that we disagree on. And that's not something to fight over. And I just think that I'm super not into the political landscape of the
mhm,
United States right now, which is an understatement. But I also am very passionate about making this making it better, making this place a place where we all can live harmoniously. And so, yeah, I want to help folks be more skillful about
mm.
the truths that they have to tell.
Well, thank you, because
You're
amen
welcome.
to that, and we need more of that. So please keep doing that. Well, in
Mhm.
closing here, Karen, tell listeners what do you have going on? Why should people look you up and where they can find you?
You can find me at www.othersunlimited.com, and there's a contact form on that website that goes directly to my inbox. So that's a great way to contact me. Others Unlimited is doing really good work for team culture. It's good for conflict resolution. It's good for collaboration. It is good for innovation and all kinds of the what makes a team. And there, I haven't yet found a place where it can't be applied. And so I think the reason to come to me is because I do it really differently and we have a lot of fun. And I think the trainings, what I've heard back from folks is that the trainings feel a lot more like a perk than a requirement, which is the intention. It's a beautiful experience that I intend to make more beautiful. What I have going on is not quite going on yet, but
Mhm.
there's a book in the works called Empathy for Assholes. And it is a book about how we get along on this crazy planet with these crazy people.
Excellent. Well, let's have you back once that book is out and let's talk about it.
Will
And
do.
thank you so much for this beautiful conversation and for sharing your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, Ezekiel. I really appreciate you.
Alrighty. We'll talk to you soon when your book's out.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye bye.
Fingers crossed. Bye.